Hey everybody, it's David Carr once again with another episode of my How I Edit series. Here you'll get to watch a real-time edit and see my thought process and my workflow in action. If you like this video, please subscribe and leave a comment or question below. I'd love to hear from you. So with all of that said, let's get to work. All right, so this image is one that I shot in Antarctica last year in January of 2019, and before the world was spinning upside down with coronavirus, and before we even had a clue that that was headed our way. So look, this is a great example of a photograph that is just dark and dull, but has great potential because of the subject matter. I mean, penguins in Antarctica, in their own territory, was quite a breathtaking thing to see. Pretty incredible, pretty remarkable all around, and was such a privilege to get to go to Antarctica. If you get a chance to go there, you have to take it. It's a must. It's so incredible. But let's get to work on this photo. First and foremost, what I'm seeing is, I don't like the fact that there are these rocks up in the top. I don't think they're necessary. Obviously, the photo is too dark, like I said. And, we're going to start with a crop because I just don't want the rocks. And I'm not going to erase the rocks because the real action is in sort of a straight line here with these penguins. So that's what I'm going to try to accentuate and really bring attention to. So I'm going to hit the R key. It's going to bring up our crop tool. We're going to go to the padlock, unlock the constrained crop. So now we can crop however we want. We can go like this. We can bring it in however we want. It's not constrained to a kind of one of the typical formats that you would normally see in a print or something. So I'm going to do kind of almost like a pano look here, sort of a panoramic shot, because there's just not a lot of information in the foreground. And there's not a lot of information in the background other than the rocks, which I just don't want. They're too far away from the penguins to make this work. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this could be a really cool shot of just the penguins in the snow. Very simple, just not a lot of information, but something compelling. So, I cropped it like that. I think I'm going to turn it down a little bit like this, kind of rotate it a little bit and get more of a parallel, the line will be more parallel to my top and bottom of my frame. This guy's kind of up a little higher, but that's okay. That's just part of the way it works here. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to hit the R key, get out of my crop tool. I mean, it's a nice wide shot, and it's gonna require some sort of a special size of print to make this work. But to me, that is way more worth it than trying to make this whole image work. I just don't think that, I think you get lost in the whole image and you sort of lose the essence of just these 5 penguins just moving along through the snow. So I'm going to start there with my crop. Now we're going to work on some tonality issues because, again, it is dark. And, this is a raw file just coming straight out of the camera, so it's going to be dark. And let's take a look. This was my Nikon D5, which sadly I no longer own. Loved that camera, but yeah, that's another story. And I was using a 200 to 500. You can't really see it there, but I'll pull this out. 200 to 500 millimeter f5.6 Nikon lens. Fantastic lens, did so well. Especially in Antarctica, where there was so much wildlife and so many things I needed to zoom way in on. And I will say, even at 500 millimeters, I was often looking for more reach than that. And so I ended up cropping a lot of my photos in more than I would like to have. But, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. You don't want to not take the shot. At least take it and try to get a good, sharp, focused shot, because you can always do some stuff with it later on to maybe enhance that sharpness. And by all means, don't not take the shot, especially if you're in a place like Antarctica where you probably don't go often, if ever. So, okay, now we're going to take a look at that tonality. We're going to go up to the develop module here and start by just brightening this thing up. It just needs to be brighter. Snow is white, folks, in case that's news to you. Snow is white, so you want it to be very bright and very white, because that's how the snow would look. Now, you get too bright and you start washing out the penguins and the detail, and so of course there's a balance. But I'm going to go fairly bright with this, because that's pretty much what we would have seen. And when I do that, I lose some of my contrast and it gets a little hazy. And I'm going to bring the blacks down now to increase that contrast a little bit. I can always use the contrast slider and it works well, but for some reason, I err on the side of using the blacks more than I do the contrast slider. It's just the way that I do it. So now we've got the blacks pulled back a little bit. Let's bring up the shadows and just play around and see if we can get a little more detail in the birds themselves. That actually helps quite a bit. You know, you don't want to lose the detail. I mean, it's kind of okay, you know, in an artistic sense to lose some of it and have sort of this almost silhouetted look, but I don't really want to do that. I do want to see some of the detail. Now, I don't want to crank it all the way and have, you know, tons of detail, which is not what I would have seen, but I just want to have a good balance. So kind of bring that up a little bit there. I'm just going to mess around with these sliders and see what they do, you know, because sometimes something will be counterintuitive, but it'll be the exact thing you need to do. So bringing back my highlights brings out a lot more of the texture of the snow, which is, you know, take it or leave it. Could be nice, maybe not. I don't really need a lot of texture personally. I don't feel like I need to show all of that texture. Now, maybe that's what you would want to show. Maybe that's, you know, what your taste would tell you to do, and that's totally fine. You know, you have to do what you feel suits the photo best for, you know, for your own artistic sensibilities. But this is just how I see it right now. I'm going to bring the texture up a little bit. I always like to play around with that and just see what it does. And I've said this in other videos. I'll kind of go to an extreme and see what it does and then pull back. It kind of doesn't do enough at the extreme to really ruin the photo. And I kind of like a lot of the texture that it's bringing out in the feathers of the birds. And in doing that, I feel like maybe I could pull my shadows back a little. I don't know. I'm going to play around with that. Clarity, probably not going to do a whole lot with clarity. Clarity is it's a weird thing sometimes. It can serve a photo really well, and then it can really destroy a photo as well, just depending on what the texture is and kind of what the subject matter is. And but I don't normally put this much texture on something, but I thought I would just try it, you know, and see, and maybe I'll pull that back at some point. Okay, let me check some dehazing here, see what that does. Now, see, that's really bringing a lot of the texture of the snow out. And again, that might be what you're going for, you know, but I don't really want to see that much texture in the snow because it starts to become a distraction, in my opinion. I mean, I could almost see this photo being like stark white with just 5 heads, you know, popping up out of the snow. But at this point, yeah, I think I'm going to pull that texture back a little bit, folks. You have to just bear with me because this is all experimentation, you know. We don't always know what we want to do. And there's no right or wrong, really. I mean, there are, you know, in the world of art, there are a lot of things that sort of tend to look better than others. But it's, you know, and there are certain things that to the human eye just always look more pleasing than others. And so it's just a matter of playing around with it till it kind of feels right. And I know that doesn't sound like a very scientific term because it's not, but it's just, you have to step back from your own photos sometimes and just ask yourself, how does this sit with me? Does this really look good? How realistic do I want it to look? Or how affected and sort of textured and filtered do I want it to look? Because sometimes that's a thing that we're going for. But in this case, it's a simple photo. We have really black, white, and orange, and I don't really see a reason to have a lot of extra information. And I'm even going to go in and get rid of some of these darker areas in the snow because I just don't feel like I need them. And so I'm going to play around. I'm just going to see if vibrance helps me at all. You know, it can bring those beaks out a little bit, the orange in the beaks, but it's not doing enough to really warrant cranking it up. And I don't normally suggest cranking either of these up, especially saturation. It can really ruin your photo quickly. Okay, not going to mess with the tone curve at this point. I think my HSL panel, my, you know, hue, saturation, luminance panel, at this point, I just don't see a reason to do anything in here. Again, because we're looking at mainly a black, white, and orange photo. There are 3 hues that we're kind of looking at here, or you could say there are multiple hues when you're talking about black and white, but I think you know what I'm saying. There's just not a lot of variance in color to have to contend with here. Sharpening, I will bring my sharpening up. I always do. I always bring it up quite a bit. I'm going to go to 100. I'm going to actually click right here. And let me zoom into 4:1, and you can already see some pixelation here because, I mean, I've already cropped this photo down. My D5 was not a super high resolution camera, although it's a fantastic camera. But And you may not be able to see that pixelation on your screen, but I'm seeing just a little bit of it. But I really wanted to see what sharpness was going to do on the edges. And it's incredible to see how much it does. I mean, if this is, if this is no sharpening, and it comes into Lightroom about like this. So I'm going to bring it up a little more. Just find the sweet spot. If I go too far, it gets gritty. And that's not really what I'm going for. But I'm going to pull it back maybe to, around 100. And then I'm going to bring my masking up and try to mute some of the sharpness that would exist, in the solid areas. Okay, I like that. I'm going to back up here on the zoom, and I'm going to hit my L key twice to look at my loop view and see how it's looking as an overall image. Yeah, I mean, so there's not a lot to do to this as far as heavy corrections, within the photo, but I do have an idea of something I want to do in Photoshop, and so let's just go ahead and head that way. So I'm going to hit Command E or Control E if you're on a Windows machine, and it's going to open up in Photoshop. Okay, and so here we are in Photoshop, ready to do some of the heavier lifting, as I call it. Some of the edits that you're just limited in Lightroom. And Lightroom is so fantastic for so many things, but when it comes to really, really working a photo, like doing some hardcore editing, you need to be in Photoshop. You really do. The first thing I'll do is, I'm in my spot healing brush tool right here. You can see that up here. And I'm gonna shrink this brush down a little bit using my left bracket key. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit too to my photo. And folks, I've said this in other videos, but the way that I edit, I'm using a mouse with my right hand and a trackpad with my left hand. And I use the trackpad to zoom in and out. And then I can move my cursor, my brush, whatever I can move with my mouse. And it's nice to work with two hands when you're editing. And it allows me to just be quick and versatile. All right, so I'm going to shrink this brush down a little bit more, left bracket key, and I'm going to erase this little spot here, and I'm going to go along and just clean up little spots. These are just minor areas in the snow that, I just don't really want to have them in the snow. So I'm just it's almost haphazard the way I'm doing this. And that's really okay. And every now and then zoom back out, make sure you're not missing something or you're not messing with something too much. Looks like I had a spot on my sensor here, so we'll get rid of that. And when I was in Lightroom, I probably should have gone into my, spot healing brush and remove some of the spots there, because there's a way you can really see them in Lightroom. And there might be a way in Photoshop, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. I don't see a whole lot. There might be one right here. But just kind of go along your photo, look it over and see if there's anything that stands out that's just a little too distracting or looks like dirt or, just doesn't look like it belongs. And obviously in a photo like this with so much white, you're not going to see a whole lot of that. It's really not bad at all. I'm going to zoom back out and see my whole image, and then I'm going to see what I want to do now with these snowy parts. But actually what I think I'm going to do first, one thing that's bothered me about this photo is I really wish that there was a little bit more of an even spacing between the penguins. I really, I can't blame them because they're just penguins and they were just doing what they do, but I kind of would love to not have all this space here and all of this space here. So I'm gonna do a little experimentation here and see what we can do to kind of get rid of some of that. And so let's figure this out. What I'll do, I'm gonna hit the M key and bring up my marquee tool, and I'm gonna go to about here. I'm gonna hit Command or Control C, copy that. I'm gonna click Control V. Actually, no, I'm actually going to cut it. So let me click Command Z, get out of that. M again for the marquee tool. And I'm gonna just take this and cut it by hitting Command or Control Z, X, excuse me, and it goes away. But now I'm gonna click Command or Control V, and it brings it back, but it kind of threw it right in the center. So if I hold the V key down or just press the V key once, it brings up the bounding box. I can slide this over now, look at that. And I can kind of bring them closer together, kind of where I want them, And watch the tops and bottoms. You want to make sure you line everything up correctly. And in Photoshop, you can kind of get it to where it will actually center it for you. It'll show you where the center is, at least. So that's centered it up. You saw that purple line there. So I will hit return and then T, and that gets rid of the box there. Okay, cool. That brought them closer together. Of course, we got a little line here that goes up, but because it's a white photo, that's going to be really easy to clean up. So we're going to do the same thing over on this side. I'm actually going to grab my my marquee tool, the M key again, and we'll just kind of draw a box around there. Again, Command or Control X, cut. Oh, you know what? Let me show you something, folks. This is something I do all the time. I was trying to cut this out, but I was in the wrong layer. I was only in that layer that I had already cut and pasted over here. So if we turn off the background layer, you'll see that the only thing in this extra layer that I've added is this. So I needed to be in this background layer. And I don't mind showing you that I made a mistake, because this is just something that is easy to do. It's easy to sometimes forget which layer you're working in. But I needed to be in the background layer. And that box there with the marquee, the marching ants, it's okay. It's still gonna work within that space, but now it's working within this background layer. So again, Command X, it goes away. Now Command or Control V brings it back to the center again. We're gonna hit V, and now we can drag it over and put the penguins where we want them. Maybe like that. Looks pretty good to me. Now see how it brought up that kind of purple line in the center? That shows that I centered this layer with the others. So everything's, horizontally speaking, everything's where it was. It's just been brought over. We've just closed that gap between those penguins. That may be something that doesn't bother you, the gap, but I just thought, what would it look like if they were all a little closer in line together? So that's what I wanted to do. All right, so I'm gonna hit return, and then T, that'll get rid of the box there. So now we have a problem, right? We have all this white space on the sides of our image, but that's really not a problem, because we can click C and bring up our crop tool. And as long as we're in a free-form crop and we're not in one of these preset ratios, we now can just crop this over. And we'll go over on this side. Click return. There it is. Okay, it looks pretty good, other than these lines right here, which we'll get rid of. But so I think that looks pretty nice actually so far. One thing I'm going to do now, and I don't always recommend doing this when you're working within layers, but I am going to merge these layers together just to make one layer. This is just going to be one photo now. It's not going to be 3 layers that I'm trying to mess with. So I'm going to hit Shift Command E. And that merges them together. So now this is one layer. I can't go back and do anything different with the layers unless I hit undo, Command Z, which would split it back up into the 3 layers, and then I could do some other things. But I don't need to do anything within those layers. I'm kind of done with the layers because I brought everything together. That's what I wanted to do here. All right, so now I'm going to experiment and see what the best way to get rid of this line is here. So let's start with, I'm going to hit the J key. And that brings up my spot healing brush tool again. And I'm just going to paint over that. Did a pretty good job there. Paint over that. Now you want to kind of zoom in, and because you can see that line. You can really see it forming there. And there are different ways to do this. I mean, you don't have to use the spot healing brush. Sometimes using the spot healing brush tool isn't going to fix it. You're going to have to go into your clone stamp tool. But you're going to just have to look here. And you want to make sure you really do fix all of it, because in certain situations the line might be more visible depending on how it's being viewed and or how it's being printed. So just want to make sure that we're actually getting rid of that line properly, and then we'll do the same thing here. I'm actually going to try, I've shown you this trick before, but you can click down here and then hold Shift and go up here and click, and it will just do a whole line there. Now, I don't like that because it really did, it just created another line. It's just a blurrier line. So let's undo, Command or Control Z, and we're just gonna do small incremental adjustments along this line. And it just kind of blends things. Didn't do a great job there, and it did okay job there. And there's probably other ways that would be superior to this. One thing I will say I would like to try is my clone stamp tool. I'm going to click the S key, and let's go to maybe grab some information from about right here. So I'm going to hold the Option key down, click, and then it's going to paint whatever I grabbed from here over here. You want to make sure your opacity is at 100% up here. But I'm just going to paint in and see if it looks. I'm going to increase my brush size a little bit, and just treat it like a paintbrush, like you're just painting little areas. You're just trying to make things look more natural. I'm going to go up here and grab some information. I'm going to click Option, click that area. Now be careful, because if you go like this, you're going to start drawing the penguin there. You don't want to do that. So Command Z will undo that. Maybe I'll grab some information here. I do recommend when you're in the clone stamp tool to move move to another source pretty frequently when you're doing something like this, because you don't want things to start looking like they're repeating. You can see right there, I'll zoom in. That's a funky little spot. I'm going to shrink my brush down a little bit and maybe grab from over here and just paint some of that in. And I want to show you this, by having a softer brush, my hardness is only at 10%. It's going to do a much smoother job. And there are times when you do want a very hard edge brush, but this is definitely not one of them, because the good thing is the snow is kind of pillowy and fluffy and out of focus in the foreground. So you have a lot more liberty with where you grab information from and how you paint it in. And with that soft edge brush, it's just going to blend in pretty nicely. And I don't think anyone's going to see it and think that I actually, spliced this photo and put it together like this. And I'm not, well, yeah, it looks like there's a little bit there that could be tweaked. So I'll just grab that, I might just snake this kind of up like that. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe a little bit there. Really fine tune it. Make sure it looks good. Make sure there's nothing, that sticks out like a sore thumb. And then we had another splice mark around here. Oh, look at that up there. I don't know if you can see that, but okay. So I'll just grab from up here and paint down. Yeah, that gets rid of that. Looks like there's a little mark right there. Grab that, paint there. There's a little bit there. I mean, I'm zoomed way in just because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Kind of looking down here. Okay, I don't see anything else that stands out too much there. Let me zoom back out, and it pretty much looks like that's how they were spaced out to me. You might see something that stands out to you, but I'm not really seeing it right now. And I could always go in and fine tune some of these other dark spots, and I can do that in Lightroom when I'm finished. When I get this back into Lightroom, I might see something that bugs me. Well, anything I need to do now in that regard could be done in Lightroom pretty effectively. So I like how I've got these guys closer together, and maybe this guy smelled really bad. I don't know, but either way, I wanted to see them in more of a single file line and spaced more equally apart. All right, so now I'm going to clean up some of these darker areas. I don't really want to keep all those. So I'm going to use my clone stamp tool again, still in that tool, and let me increase the size here. And I'm going to just grab, this is a pretty big brush, but I'm going to grab from right here, again hitting Option, and I'm going to paint in there. I'm not going to just keep painting. I think I will kind of grab other areas and paint them in. Make sure that what you're doing looks legit. The problem is the shallow depth of field. It gets shallower towards the foreground. The closer towards the bottom of the frame, it's a little more out of focus. And as I get up here, things get a little more in focus. So what I just painted there is more in focus than what is around it. So that probably wasn't the best adjustment. I'm going to click Command Z and undo. And actually, I will stay down in this region and pull information from here, from this lower region, to fill in here for that reason. And again, folks, I really love to show you the trial and error. I love to show you where I try something and it doesn't work, because that's really part of the process here. Let me grab from there, maybe paint that in. Maybe grab from there. The more random you can make it, the more it's probably going to look believable. All right, that cleaned that up quite a bit for me. I like that. There's some here that I think I would like to get rid of. So I'm just playing with my brush size. Grab there. Yep. It's just cleaning it up ever so slightly and making anything that's darker that sort of might pull your attention away from the main subject, which is obviously the penguins. It kind of just alleviates some of that. Really like it. Yeah. Now you can get crazy and you can really hyper focus. I don't recommend that, but just, definitely there was some stuff here that I wanted to get rid of. I'm going to go back to my spot healing brush tool, shrink it down, and just paint these little spots out. You have to imagine that this thing is on a big canvas hanging in a gallery and or an art show or something, and you're looking at it much bigger than you saw it on your screen, and you're like, oh man, I wish I'd gotten rid of that little spot. Oh, I wish I'd seen this. I wish I'd seen that. And that's the whole reason for fine-tuning and really just taking your time to work on it, I can't tell if that's another dust spot, but it doesn't serve the photo, so I might as well get rid of it. That looks like a dust spot. Yeah, the sensors got a little dirty in Antarctica from the ocean spray and things like that. It was just, all kinds of stuff floating around, but nonetheless, a beautiful place. I think I'll get rid of this. Again, I'm in my spot healing brush tool and just randomly grabbing dark spots and just removing them. All right. That looks good to me. Just giving it one last look over. Maybe these here, I think I'm going to see what a large spot healing brush tool will do right there. That seemed to work. And then maybe right here. Let me shrink that down a little bit. I've said it many times, but there are just so many different ways you could tackle that, but that's just, a lot of times the spot healing brush tool is a great first start to try at least. I'm not seeing a whole lot else that's bugging me about this photo. I don't really want to do much to the penguins themselves. I think they look pretty awesome as they are. You could go in and clean up some of the little white spots, but that's really what their heads look like, and I don't see a reason to do that. All right, well, let's head back into Lightroom then. So I'm going to click Command or Control S, and that'll take us back. Okay, and there it is. This is the photo that we just worked on in Photoshop. I'm going to click L 2 times, bring up my loop, and that looks pretty good. Now, looking at it, maybe I could work on the crop a little bit more. Maybe I should come in just a tad more from this side. Maybe I could go even narrower with it. The cool thing is you have room to work with. If you really want to get a super pano look, something that just really, really is wide and it kind of just the frame in and of itself makes a statement, you could do that. That's a very wide photo, but that could look really cool, depending on where you hang it. And there's not a lot of other information, so really, why not just do a really crazy wide pano of it? But for now, I think I'll just go back to, I'm going to just undo what I've done there and go back to the crop that we came back in from Photoshop with, which should be this one here. Looks pretty good to me overall, folks. I'm happy with it, and there are other things I could do. I could continue to work on the texture in the snow and see if I want to get rid of more of it. I could add more haze. Of course, I don't really like what that does to the penguins themselves, but I'm not really bothered by it. I think I like that I evened out the snow. I evened it out, and there are things I could do. I could have, in Photoshop, I could have brought this guy down to where it was more of a straight line, but to me, that starts getting nitpicky. This is nature, and I've already kind of augmented nature quite a bit by, splicing the photo like I did. But to me, that looks pretty awesome. I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm going to sign off on it. So thank you very much once again for watching another episode of How I Edit, and I hope that this inspires you to get out there, take great photos, and learn how to edit them and just get them to completion and across the finish line. That's all I've got for you today. I'll be back with another one soon. Take care.